So, good morning again to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Evelyn Morgan. I am professor at the IFRJ, and I'm here as coordinator of this feasibility study. This webinar is going to show the results of our feasibility study, if it is possible not to create this program in Brazil, talking about the perspective of how educators have been undergoing persecutions. The first information I would like to give you is that this webinar is being recorded. So if anybody has any problem in regards to this, please let us know, because we will then publish the video on YouTube so that more people can have access. I would like also to inform you and ask you kindly to choose the channel translation. Down here you have the option Portuguese and English. In the little globe, you click in the interpretation globe and choose the channel. I would ask you all to choose Portuguese or English. This is very important to run the event, because when speakers speak in English, we will all be able to hear and vice versa. So I'm going to start by thanking the presence of all of you here, but especially thanking some people who made this event possible. Thank number one, IFRJ for the support to the project, for all the partnership during these months of studies. Especially thank Marcos Vinicius, who is our first speaker representing IFRJ, and because he is the leader of the research group, the GP Tech we are part of. He is Dean for Research, and he is representing the Institute. Thank you very much, Marcos. I would like to thank friends and the team of GP Tech, which is the research group, and all the team of the project, such as Renan, Amanda, Daniela, and Fernanda, who made it all be possible. And thank Pamela, who is going to also make a presentation. And I would like to thank Protect Defenders for the funding of this study that is so important. That's why I thank Luciana, who is here, Luciana Peri. Thank you very much for the support during all these months, the presence and the funding from Protect Defenders. I would like to thank some partner institutions who contributed: Global Justice, MST, the Institute Marielle Franco, the movement of Professor Against Schools with No Party, and Frontline, who is also present here. So I thank also Tara Maden for all the support that Frontline has been offering for the study, and a partnership that has been there for a long time. This webinar is part of the second webinar in education and human rights. We had 3 events this year. This is the 3rd event of the seminar. And those who like the topic and wants to accompany can find us on the networks in YouTube with practices of teaching and human rights on YouTube. I'll put the link in the chat. And we also have a website with all the material of this research was published, and you can have access to. And we're also going to include in the chat the institutional website. Educators are defenders. I would also like to tell you in the chat, we will have a link with a presence list. It's very important for all of you to sign. So at the end, you can receive the certificate. So we will also know how many people are present and value the presence of all. As a product, an outcome of this, we created an ebook and a booklet. And Pamela will talk more about it. All who register for the event will receive this material through the internet to be able to go in deeper into the theme and continue the debate in other ways. With all this opening concluded, we're really moved. It's a very important moment for us. I would like to pass the floor to Marcos Vinicius Pereira, who is here representing the Institute. Thank you, Evelyn. Good morning. Great morning to all who are present here. Usually I refer to people, but I know that in English, this in Portuguese, people, the people contemplate all genders. So, but I could also say uh, it's a great joy to be and participate in the seminar of democratic education and human rights. And here I'm going to balance between my place of speech, leader of education and culture, with one of the lines of research, the practice of human rights, and as representative, institutional representative of the Institute. We are like this. We are not little separate boxes. We're involved in all activity. I want to greet Pamela and Evelyn, coordinators of the project, and Tara, Luciana, who's the interpreters, translators, of the fellows who participated in talking about the importance of this project inside the IFRJ. And to speak a bit this, I have to retrieve when Professor Pamela and I thought about this group in 2012 that didn't have practices of teaching and human rights, but we had actions related to this. At that moment, for example, in 2014, we promoted a seminar of sexual diversity in the Rio de Janeiro campus in the Maracana region when there was no gender and diversity. It was just the genesis of this. There was no formalization. When Pamela and I delivered classes in the post-graduation, one of the seminar in our roundtable, we thought it was important that a post-graduation for science, biology, and chemistry professors, we thought it was important to bring the agenda of human rights to the teaching. It's kind of natural, especially because of Pamela's trajectory. We had this embodied. Unfortunately, Brazil and some countries, this it is embodied because of some needs. The project we're seeing now, and I thought at that thinking that educators, our professors, our defenders, we thought not so distant in Brazil. Now it's not anymore, unfortunately. I have a very close friend who went through dismissal from a public institution in Brazil for clear political positioning and disputes. This short track record is to show that our research team that has a website that is not too updated, we try, but it's the official site of the group, adding different lines, which is gptec.org. It acts in different fronts, but I would say this is one of the fronts that brilliantly gather all people of the group. I don't belong to this group of research where Evelyn and Pamela take part, but at some moment we got together to think about these lines. And they more directly do research on this area. And as I've been for years as vice president of research and innovation, they bring the idea, the project, they contemplated with the project. And I took on the task of running this project with the help of the frontline defenders and IFRJ. I can say I, as vice president, can say it's hard. It's hard because of bureaucratic region, because Brazil has all this bureaucracy, because of public resources or government resource, even if the fund were already Brazilian, how things are accomplished, but we still will conduct it. I want to congratulate Pamela and Evelyn for this political position to do this with public resources. And I did as much as I could to collaborate for everything to take place so that Renan and the other two fellows could act in the project. We have this double role, people helping the research, but we have people graduating also when we have fellows acting in the scholarship. The scholarship comes afterwards. It's necessary because people need, but it's really the formation and research. It's the educated independent, regardless if it's a doctor or a person in the graduation. That's why in the vice presidency, one of my agenda was to approve the regulation of the post-internship project, a fruit of conversations with Pamela in the GP Tech. Not exactly a PhD has to be connected to a post-graduation, but the postdoctor can follow to IFRJ, participating in a group of research, such as the GP Tech, who has a research line which is incredible. My speech is more of a welcome and do this very brief track record on the side of the GP Tech, and also reinforcing that it was an institutional interest of the IFRJ Professor Magat to understand what the project was and that it be run here. I hope we have a productive morning. I'm very, very curious. I'm here in this role in the participation, but I don't know all the results. I only saw some teasers, and I hope we have a very productive morning.
Thank you, Marcos. Now I would like to give the floor to Professor Pamela, and where she's going to launch ebook comics for rights, and she's going to present the results of the feasibility study. Thank you, Pamela. Welcome. It's very nice to have you here and watching the presentation of the results. Just a reminder, if you feel like asking any question at the end of our event, we are going to have a round of Q's and A's. Get your pen and please write down your questions so that at the end we can discuss with our speakers. Thank you very much, Pamela. You have the floor. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to break the protocol before talking about the launching of the book itself. I'm really moved, and I'm the coordinator of the feasibility study together with Evelyn, who is the vice coordinator. But as Black women in Brazil say, I am because we are. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be presenting these findings if we were not many people involved. And it is especially moving to launch these findings. at this point in time in Brazil, where over 600,000 lives were taken out by the COVID and could have been avoided if we believed more in science, if we had investment in lay and democratic education. So this event is also a resistance. I wasn't able to take the name of all those participants, but I would like some people who are here, especially our team. Amanda Mendonça, who is here. She was the General Research Coordinator. Fernanda Terra, who did all the administrative work. Daniela Correia, our fellow in the extension courses, and Renan Collier, who is here with us and is our fellow of digital content. And the team of educator are defenders. I also would like to thank some partnerships who are represented here, like Renata Quilo and Fernando Pena representing the teachers, the school, Laís, Gabriela Isis from the GP Tech, and Eve from the frontline defender, who was crucial to boost our ideas, and Susan from Disciples, and who we have met for many years, Harriet Bondi, Suen from IFRJ, Daniela Zanotti from IFRG, J, and many others that I may have forgotten. Not to take too long, let's launch the ebook. Renan, can you share the pictures or the slides, talking very briefly, but not so briefly. Otherwise, the translator is going to get mad at me because I speak too fast. The ebook that is being launched today, and very shortly, you are going to receive the link in the chat, and afterwards is a result of a story, a long-standing story. They were 5 comics written in Portuguese, English, and Spanish that were written since 2019 up to 2020, and that counted on the support of IFRJ, the financial support, and also from frontline defenders. This work would not be possible without Thais Linhares, that in addition to be a great illustrator, is an activist of human rights that I met in the struggle for human rights. This collective dimension of the human rights in Brazil is extremely relevant to us. And we hope we can make of this book an instrument to disseminate our languages. So I count on all of you to disseminate this ebook and to be translated into many languages. We had Professor, all of those, Valdinei Lobo from Manila, from Spanish, and then the launch as an ebook of this publication. And this being said, now I'm going to show you the results of our research. Am I right, Evelyn? So, okay, Renan, I would like you to show my slides. All right. Okay, so Evelyn and Renan, can okay, so I'm going to time myself not to exceed my time. Okay, firstly, I would like to say that it's not going to be possible to present all the results in 15 minutes. So we had the choice to select the data we would like to show in the feasibility study for the creation of a program for a sheltering program that we call educators or teachers are defenders. A brief introduction for those who are not familiar with the topic. The welcoming program is a program that receives some people who have suffered any type of violation. physical or psychological. And this person would relocate from their working site and would stay in this program, in this sheltering program for some time. What pathways have taken us to the project, and why we are so moved to be here and talking about this? Because the pathways that took us to this project go through our bodies and also through the violations we have suffered. We are not an academia or an academic institute far from society and from the struggles we face. We are the institute that is together with society. As Professor Marco said, the GPTech has a history of actions in human rights that go beyond the studies and research, practical actions that seek to change society, making it more egalitarian and without violations. As I said, our bodies were also affected. In this research group, we have three teachers and researchers that were sheltered or welcomed by these programs. As I said, to be welcome in a program like this, you have to have gone through some kind of violation. This is not positive at all. It's the welcoming that comes from a sadness. I was the first one to be sheltered, and I thank very much frontline defenders in the person of Ivy and Tara. When in 2018, I needed this shelter, and I was able, as we said in Brazil, to transform this grief into a fight. And today, I'm here some years later, even if we still have some questions. Who ordered the killing of Marielle Franco? And this has not been answered. And we say we are not going to be interrupted. This study is on that too, to say that we Black women, LGBTQ plus, the indigenous population will never be stopped and will continue fighting for our rights. After that, Laizi, who is here and who is also our researcher, she's not a teacher. She belongs to a research group. Laizi went to the York University, and now, and she's here, and she is in Scotland. So everything, in this study was due to the conservative advancement in the area of education, where the debate of the lay education has to do with a democratic education. And I would like to thank, the partnership of the teachers of the school without any political parties that has become, at the vanguard of that. The focus of our feasibility study was teachers of the public education network and also the private network in the fundamental and higher education in Brazil, teachers of community pre-college entrance education in the whole national territory. And we understand that are all of those that are not necessarily linked to an education institution, but carry out activities of formal studies such as teaching write, how to read and write, the remedial work, and so on. So what were the questions of our feasibility study? Well, there were 4 questions that gave us this perspective. Is there a demand for a program with these features in Brazil? First question. Second one, in case this demand is confirmed based on intersectional approach, taking into account the gender, race, and class, what would be the profile of these teacher defenders to be sheltered? Third, is IFRJ in a position to create and maintain a program such as this? The fourth and last question, what financial and human resources as well as partnerships are needed for creating and consolidating a program such as this? And what actions have we implemented in order to try to answer these questions? There were 8 interviews with the sheltering programs of EUTRP platform. This is a platform that brings together the sheltering program. Luciana will be able to speak better about this platform. And together with the Marielle Franco Institute, we conducted a research, educators or teachers at risk, 3 events for releasing the results of the research, one in August, another one in November. In August was jointly with the Office of Vice President of IFRJ, the 11 together with, the lay nature of education, and now the creation of a network of interlocutors and collaborators. And this is very relevant because we understand that in a network we are stronger, and the publication of the results of the study in different languages. We are going to have a primer in Portuguese and English. We have the website at the IFRJ portal and the YouTube.
I imagine that you're all very curious for the results. We made a survey with all in the reports of newspapers, the blog, about the persecution of professors or teachers in 2018 electoral year against human rights speech. And we received a total of 77 articles of websites, blogs, and pages on network that talked about this teachers' persecution, as you can see in the graph. This has been growing. So if in 2018 we have 11 articles, in 2021, when we finished the study in August this year, we had already 40 articles, and the total was 77. The research Educators at Risk was made together with the Marielle Franco Institute and made us reach a questionnaire. This questionnaire was online and it was publicized in the social networks. We have questions, total of 26 questions, and it was filled in by 800 people. 837 questionnaires responded from all the regions of Brazil. Greatest number from the Southeast, but bring results that were quantitative that were very important. So in the filling in of this questionnaire, again, I have to thank Amanda Mendonça, who was fundamental as general assistant for the partnership, for the research. Majority of responders of 35 to 45 years of age, followed by 45 to 60. In regards to the participation of gender, great majority women answering in the research, 59.4%, which matches the data of the Brazilian education census that assert that basic education in Brazil is majorly made by women. And in our questionnaire, we had a greatest participation of white people, 57.2%, followed by people declared Black or mixed, 14%. In regards to how these educators feel, and here I would like to make a pause. It's important for us to have this in the study. 98% All participants consider important to approach human rights in the practice as educator, teacher. The teachers of this country want and think it is important to talk about human rights in their classroom. More than one half, 64.7%, have already suffered harassment, um, crackdowns, or censure. Here, how does they feel in the current context of the country? If they feel persecuted, 82.1%. 77% say they had their health, mental health affected by the condition in the country. And 63.8% are afraid of suffering retaliations or being dismissed because of their action as educator. More than a half of educators of our country are afraid of accomplishing their task, afraid of being persecuted and suffer retaliation. When they were asked about the program of welcoming or sheltering, the future of these sheltering programs for educators, the great majority, 90.8%, would like this program to provide legal assistance. So this also reveals the judicialization through which we've been going through. Our freedom of teaching is being attacked. 90.2% would like this program to make psychological follow-up available, so the deployment of our mental health. 61.3% would like to have an education or a training in digital security, participation in lives, in the remote teaching, the lives are being more and more constant. 59.6% talk about the importance of spaces, venues for the practice of self-care. 58.9% would like to have a political education, as well as 55.7% would like to have activities of academic education. People from all the parts of Brazil would like to have 41.2% activities of culture and leisure, and only 33.1% would like to have a temporary trip to another region, that this could be guaranteed. The program of sheltering that exists today in the platform that we started, and together with Protect Defenders, the characteristic of a sheltering program is this temporary trip, this removal from that space. It's a temporary reallocation. It's the desire for this temporary trip has still a very low percentage. This was only a sample of our results. They're all available here, and I'm here to answer your question together with Evelyn, and saying that our results will be published on our institutional website, and Renan will send you the link. It's in the portal of the Federal Institute, and I thank the Rio de Janeiro Federal Institute. It's a state of Brazil that oftentimes is considered a violator of human rights. We, as a public institution, we are promoters of human rights, educators for human rights. So the unofficial website of the Federal Institute of Rio de Janeiro, we have all the results of the study published. We will also publicize briefly in the next weeks following weeks. These educators are defenders of human rights. This booklet, uh, this is the front page, and this was made by Renan Collier and will be made available in Portuguese and English with a more accessible language to our results. And our channel on the YouTube, when we will eventually publish this event that is being recorded, and other videos and other results. Here we have some, I would like to show some conclusions and this study of feasibility. So it's the assertion that educators are human rights defenders, especially in the Brazilian context of violations. The results that bring visibility to a real demand for the creation of a program with these characteristics in Brazil, and also encourage new programs in Brazil and Latin America. And as Professor Marcos said in the beginning, during these studies, we realized the challenges and some incompatibilities of a welcoming program with a public profile, an academic profile of the institution. We know and perceive in all our interviews that it is important to be fast in raising funds. It's important to offer activities that oftentimes are not academic, and the IFRJ perhaps isn't able to deliver at this moment. But in our board of research, in our networks of operation, the possibility to act collaboratively with other existing programs, or perhaps encouraging some new programs in Brazil and Latin America. I would like to close with a phrase that was a landmark in 2018, which is, nobody lets go of the hand of anybody. We're going together. All the illustrations were made by Thais Linhares. Thank you, and we follow on. Thank you, Pamela, for this touching presentation. We were very touched, not only because of your speech that touches all of us, but to see this data. We knew Brazil was experiencing this conservative wave, but when we went out on the streets to hear education, the numbers surprised us to see that more than 82% of educators feel threatened. This is very significant. And of these, more than 64% have suffered some harassment, persecution, or censure when when carrying out their profession. Thank you, Pamela, for the partnership, for this speech. And now I would like to invite Tara from Frontline Defenders that will have a moment to dialogue with the experience of Frontline that already does this welcoming of defenders, be able to have a dialogue, even questions if you have. You have the word, Tara.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here in Ireland where there is a big storm blowing outside, so I hope you can hear me okay. And in fact, all our schools and universities are closed today because of the storm. So it's a huge privilege to be here representing Frontline Defenders. I am a huge fan of your work. We really see IFRJ as leading in this area in bringing a focus to educators as human rights defenders. At Frontline Defenders, we work with all types of human rights defenders from all over the world. And our aim is to try to support them and to try and provide resources for protection. And as part of that, we have a rest and respite program for human rights defenders. And in fact, we have had a program focused on this area of combating stress and burnout of human rights defenders for a long time. So in 2005, we first started hosting human rights defenders in Dublin. We started very small, so one defender at a time with 2 per year, and we've built that up to hosting about 10 human rights defenders per year in Dublin. And to date, we've supported over 100 human rights defenders in Dublin. And the program has evolved over time. So now it's not just about hosting defenders in Ireland. It's not just that temporary relocation part, which I'll explain in detail what that part of the program looks like. But it has become more flexible than that and supporting defenders where they are at the moment in a range of different ways, because there are a lot of factors that contribute to stress and burnout, and there are a lot of factors that contribute to well-being and self-care, and that support and solidarity that human rights defenders need, and that time out that they need. So we can also support counselling or financial support for other well-being techniques inside their country, or language classes, or a short break with their family within the country, and things like that. So that piece that Pamela shared of what educators would like from a program like this, that it was interesting that only about 30% mentioned the relocation part as important, and there were a number of other factors that they were looking for first. So that's quite interesting. So to tell you a little bit about how our program works. So for the human rights defenders we host in Dublin, the purpose is for some time out. So it's a chance to take a break from their work, to take a break from the environment in which they're working, and to really focus on themselves, and to focus on their health and well-being. So it's a very flexible program. The primary focus is rest. So they can do nothing at all, and that's okay. They can do some tourism, leisure activities. They can focus on their health, so a medical assessment or physiotherapy or dentist, things like that, or massage, anything related to what makes them feel better. Sometimes it's just walking by the sea, or getting good sleep patterns, or healthy eating. And having time to focus on that can make a big difference. Then there are capacity building. It's a chance to do something with this new free time. And sometimes actually going from the intensity of the human rights work and the persecution to a space where there's no formal agenda or program can be too much. So it's helpful to have some kind of structure, whether it's English classes, language lessons, a research project, or some other types of capacity building. So it could be training with the host organization. So from our side, that often involves digital security training, an assessment of their laptop or phone to check the digital security on that side, risk assessment and protection planning, and there's certainly preparation and discussion of a security plan for the return home. Then there are maybe the networking opportunities. So there's huge learning that at Frontline Defenders, we receive from the human rights defender. They would explain about their work, about the current risks they're facing and the challenges that human rights defenders face in that country, and what would better help them. So that's huge learning for us as the host organization. And then there can be the exchange of experiences and learning between human rights defenders on the program. So often we have maybe 2 or 3 human rights defenders hosted at the same time, with different experiences, different countries, different contexts. And that can bring learning, solidarity, friendships, and very interesting discussions. So that can be something, kind of a side benefit. And then there are external opportunities, so possibly a discussion with an academic or other NGOs, or interviews with media even, or speaking to students at universities. So that opportunity to speak about their work and speak about their experiences gives them that recognition. If it's safe to do so, obviously it's a question of whether it's safe for them to go out and speak externally. So there are some of the things that we offer and that human rights defenders find useful. We get a range of different types of feedback on the impact of the R&R. Sometimes it can be as simple as being able to sleep, or the energy and the renewed energy, and a sense of renewed resistance and wanting to go back and returning with maybe fresh ideas, or a different perspective on the work that human rights defenders do is often an impact that they share with us. So I believe that these supports and these programs are very important. They recognize human rights defenders as human beings, first and foremost. There's huge burden on leaders in human rights spaces, that they carry so much responsibility, and they're always caring for other people. So that ability to focus on themselves and to give themselves a break can be huge. The solidarity, the recognition of them as human rights defenders. So they're both, themselves in their own lives and also in their work. So it's recognition for their human rights work. And it's also an opportunity for the Irish government to recognise human rights defenders and to make them feel welcome and supported. This can be in practical ways, giving them visas or inviting them in to speak to the Department of Foreign Affairs, so that the Irish government is learning from them and giving them that space, which can be very important. So I am hugely passionate about education and human rights education, and I'm really excited about this area, because one of the challenges that we have in reaching the more marginalized human rights defenders and the defenders who are less connected to international spaces is often that they're not recognized as defenders, or maybe they don't recognize themselves as defenders, and therefore they're not aware of the supports available to them. And the types of persecution that they face may not be recognized enough. So bringing this feasibility study contributes to that recognition of the persecution that so many educators in Brazil feel and face on a day-to-day basis, how high on their agenda human rights is in their everyday teaching across many subjects and across many levels of education. So it's very interesting that it's, educators at primary level, secondary level, university level, and also informal education or adult education and lifelong learning, those spaces. So I think that could be a huge opportunity to see how educators at different levels come together and share their different experiences. And also, it's very interesting for you to develop this expertise of how to support educators as human rights defenders specifically. So what are the needs of this specific group? Because there are other organizations which I learn about through spaces provided by Protect Defenders and some of the other organisations here. So there's the wonderful work of Justice and Peace and the Shelter Cities Initiative, the Scottish Fellowship, York University, etc., etc. And some organisations focus on specific types of human rights defenders. So, for example, journalists at risk, or lawyers at risk, or scholars at risk may be one of the closest providers of this type of support to defenders, because they focus on academics at risk and hosting academics at risk, scholars at risk in universities around the world. But also, the experience of Dundee and York hosting at a university is also very interesting, because you can provide a certain environment, you can provide expertise and a space for generating new knowledge and new expertise is fascinating. So I was very interested in hearing about the different elements of a program that educators mentioned were important to them. So the legal assistance was the first one at 91%. That's quite interesting, because that isn't necessarily part of our rest and respite program, though we do provide support for legal assistance through our protection grants program. So that's very interesting, maybe very specific to the context in Brazil for educators. The political education and academic education, very interesting. So I think it's a very exciting space to be in at the moment, and I would be looking forward to hearing more about it and hearing from the educators here today how they find this and what they're most looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara, for your speech. It's important for us to know a bit more about the work of Frontline, who does this such important to host these defenders. And certainly we continue in a dialogue. As we presented a small part of the research, we could share more afterwards. Thank you very much. And now I will pass the word to Luciana Perez from Protect Defenders, that will explain a bit about the platform, the shelter program. This was funded by Protect Defend and dialogue with some results. Thank you very much, Luciana. Thank you very much for your presence.
I wanted to start to giving the general information about the organization that I represent and the different programs, to give you an idea about how we ended up today here with Pamela and Evelyn and this wonderful team that has been working in this research. As our colleagues mentioned, I work for Protect Defenders. Protect Defenders is the mechanism of the European Union to protect human rights defenders at risk. And Protect Defenders is a consortium of 12 organizations working with the protection of human rights defenders at risk. Frontline Defenders, for example, is one of the members of this consortium. So Protect Defenders implement different actions and different programs to support the defenders at risk. Some of them are implemented by the partners of the consortium, and some of them are implemented by the secretariat of the consortium. And most of our programs are related in some way with the support for defenders who need to be relocated inside their own countries or in another regions. One of the actions that Protect Defenders is implementing right now is to coordinate the European Union Temporary Relocation Platform, the EUTRP. The UTRP, as Pamela mentioned in her presentation, is a network of more than 70 entities working with the relocation of defenders at risk. And as Pamela also mentioned, during this research, they got to interview 8 of the members of the platform who are running temporary relocation programs and hosting defenders. But by the middle of last year, by the middle of 2020, Protect Defenders decided to start a new program. And this new program is named Shelter Initiatives Program. And it was created to support new entities who wanted to start to implement new projects for the temporary relocation of defenders. But this program has a very particular characteristic, and it is that we are supporting temporary relocation programs that are working in a national or in a regional perspective. It means that the defenders who are at risk are relocated in the same country or in the same region where they are acting as defenders. They don't need to travel to other continents, for example. And we decided to prioritize this line of work because after years of experience, we could identify that there are a lot of defenders who don't feel comfortable traveling, for example, to Europe because several reasons. But we can stress, for example, the different language, the different weather, the cultural differences, and also the psychological aspect, how they are emotionally affected knowing that they are so far away from their house and their homes. Also, we have identified that the national and regional programs are closer to the field, so they have closer relationship with other organizations and other actors working in the field where the defenders usually work. So they can provide a closer follow-up after the return of the defenders. So for all these reasons, Protect Defenders at some point decided to launch this new program, Shelter Initiative Programs, to support entities trying to establish new temporary relocation programs. We received 60 applications, and Tara was in the selection committee too. It was very hard for us to make a decision. And among these 60 applications that we received, one of them was the one from the Instituto Federal de Rio de Janeiro. At the end, only 12 applications were elected, and one of them was this one. And we classified the different proposals that we received in 3 different groups. Some of these proposals were to develop a research, a feasibility research, to see if it was accurate or not to develop and to implement a temporary relocation program in a specific country or in a specific region. And that's exactly in the category that the Institute of Rio de Janeiro is. They were one of the 3 entities that are developing feasibility research to establish that. And it is very interesting because during this process, we also established a network with the different applicants. So Brazil, for example, worked very closely with another feasibility research that is being implemented in Tanzania and another one that is being implemented in Sri Lanka. So we had workshops, roundtables, etc., to exchange learning among them. And there were very fruitful spaces for this purpose, I think. And it's very interesting how obviously there are some difference because the context and the regional difference, but also there are many things that are similar because at the end the defenders are at risk all over the world, right? So yes, what I wanted to stress is that all this is part of a big network of entities and people working for the protection of defenders and the temporary relocation. And the role that the Institute of Rio de Janeiro has been playing has been crucial. Because, and that's how we ended up here, right? I personally enjoy a lot this process with Pamela and with Evelyn and with the whole team. Each meeting that we have had was a space of reflection. We had meetings of hours, 2-3 hours talking and thinking and rethinking about how this research could be and how these results could finally impact the well-being of the defenders that we are trying to support. And also, I would like to highlight the commitment and the professionalism of the team. Obviously, I'm always talking about Pamela and Evelyn because they are the both with whom I have had more contact, but I know that there is a whole team implementing this research. Also, of course, we have faced some challenges, right? As Pamela also mentioned, mainly related with the administrative aspects, because also, as Pamela mentioned, once the feasibility research is done, and if the institution decides to start to implement this program, it is very necessary to count with a huge support of the financial team, because there is a huge need to provide rapid response to the situations faced by people at risk. So that's why it is very important to have that administrative capacity to provide this rapid response once the program is being implemented, right? Also, and I'm remembering now some conversations we had with Tara and with the other members of the selection committee. We identified the needs to come with more temporary relocation programs in Latin America, particularly in South America, for defenders from South America. But also, we identified the need to count with a program for Brazil, because as you know, Brazil is one of the countries with the highest number of defenders at risk. And it's a huge country, and there's a lot of people living there. So we thought that it was an incredible opportunity to have a national program for defenders from Brazil in Brazil, because also the extent of the country allows us to do internal relocations. And here I wanted to jump also to this result that only 33% of the people who has been interviewed reply that they would need a temporary relocation, that they would need to be relocated in another region. And I think that it is a very predictable result, very expected result, because we have to keep in mind that the temporary relocation is only one action in a whole package of actions to protect human rights defenders. And only a small percentage of these defenders could be benefit from a temporary relocation program. But most of them would need other kind of actions to support them. As you mentioned, legal support, psychosocial support, well-being activities, training, etc. But the most important is that for those looking for temporary relocation options, these options should be integral and holistic options. It means that a temporary relocation program shouldn't provide to the defender only tickets, house, and food. They should only provide all the other aspects of an integral relocation: legal assistance, psychosocial sessions, pleasures, activities, sports, etc. And it is also very important to have in mind that most of the defenders, when need to be relocated with their families, with members of their families, their couples, their childs, etc. And it's part of an integral temporary relocation program too. And to start to close my intervention, I wanted to stress two more things. As I mentioned, in the UTRP, there are a lot of temporary relocation programs with different characteristics. And one of these programs that come to my mind right now was developed but by a former participant on another temporary relocation program. I'm thinking in the temporary relocation program in Georgia, Tbilisi, was developed by a former participant of the Netherlands Shelter Cities programs. And I must say that it provided a great advantage to this program to count with a former participant of this program as the coordinator, because this person could appreciate not only the positive aspect of the relocation, but also the challenges that she faced while she was relocated in the other program. And it means that if, like you, as Pamela mentioned, are former participants of temporary relocation program, you are in a very privileged position to improve this program and to try to superate the challenges that the other programs are facing. And finally, to say that in the UTRP, there are other programs supporting scholars at risk, but from a very, very formal perspective. They take as scholars mainly university professors or students of PhDs. But I think it's a huge, huge advantage from your proposal, your research, the fact to include popular educators as human rights defenders who are at risk and educators, and not only academics from a formal perspective. Okay, I will close here because I exceeded my time. But once again, I want to thank you, really, really thank you a lot, because this amazing job that you have performed and this research that was very serious, but also has added a great value to the research field of the temporary relocation. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Luciana, pela sua fala. É muito interessante a gente compreender um pouco melhor.
Presentation.
Eu acho que você.
And I think, sorry, I was in the wrong channel. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very important to understand the work developed by Protect Defenders that support the creation of new temporary location programs, such as the feasibility research. And not everybody know what is in the backstage, but the Protect Defender was not only the financier, gave us all the support, even before administering the survey so this very close assistance by Luciana and the Secretary Office for Protect Defenders made this study possible. Thank you. So now this is the moment for opening for Q's and A's for those who would like to ask a question to Pamela, Tara, Luciana, or even an overall comment. So please, here in the bottom, in reactions, you can click and raise your hand and open the microphone to ask your question or make any remark. So I just would like to ask you not to take too long for your remarks. So we have a question. I'll give the floor to Amanda. Please, who is part of our project, you may ask your question, Amanda. Good morning to all those participants. It's a great emotion to see the end of a project such as this that involves so many things. The red tape we faced and a very difficult year because of the pandemic. So everybody with their personal crisis, was very hard to deal with all that. I have a question, but I would like to make some considerations. I use my individual case. I never use my personal case in this space, but today I feel like doing it on how it was very important to participate in this study as a person, as a teacher. And I see my colleagues know the situations I have been faced. I have been suffering harassment, persecution for about 3 years. and even being an activist, a defender of uh, rights, it was hard to admit what was happening to me. I tried to make it, to normalize it, and it took a long time for me to accept this process. And when you accept it, it's a very tough moment, and that affects your certainty, your desire to continue as an educator. I'm saying this because I went through a moment of doubt, and this was fundamental. It gave me the idea that I wasn't alone, and there were so many similar cases to mine, but sometimes even worse than mine. And they gave me the energy to say, I want to continue doing this. I have a long way to go. And it's a matter of giving visibility to what's happening. Another process that strengthened me a lot, I'm in one of the programs of temporary relocation in the University of Dundee, and I talked to the person responsible, and it was fundamental to be part of this hosting program. And I see many colleagues here that sometimes do not have an idea what it means. It's an opportunity for you to rethink and strengthen. I'm going back to Brazil this week, and I feel uh, stronger due to the opportunities I had here. But I would like to raise 2 points. First, the importance of bringing visibility to what's happening to educators in Brazil. We have several educators, but they are isolated initiatives. We have educational action, our studies, and many other projects. And we need to give more visibility to these programs. The news from Brazil arrive here, but not concerning what's happening with the educator. The education is silenced. And this is the society we are living today. And lastly, I have a question is to Evelyn and Pamela to comment on general lines. A data that caught our attention, it's only 33% of the respondents would like to be part of this temporary relocation. And I believe that this is related with the number of women who answer the questionnaires and the difficulties women face to relocate. So I would like to hear more about this. When a program such as this is deployed, what can we do to strengthen the women, the mothers, since we have all the responsibilities in the family? And lastly, what Luciana said is very important and reaffirmed the idea that we need a program such as this in Latin America. And at the same time, our study signaled the huge challenges concerning bureaucracy, funds. We cannot deny the importance of a program, but we have to think collectively how we can ensure funds and institution that is really in a position to host a program that has huge demands. I think I exceeded my time, but thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Amanda. I would like to tell Luciana, Pamela, and Tara, if you want to ask questions among yourselves, feel free to do it. Does anybody else have any question? Can we do that? So we can have a group of questions and then ask them to answer the questions. Anybody else besides Amanda? I would like to make a comment after listening to all the presentations, especially Pamela, when she talks about the pandemic. And we who participated in study, we saw the impact of the pandemic in the difficulty in running the research and the educators' difficulties. And part of the educator stress has to do with the online questions and hacked classes. And this has impacted our activities, the threat of having our presentations recorded. I want to hear from Tara and Luciana, who Luciana through her platform, and Tara as well. How did the programs deal with the pandemic? How to access the human rights defenders, and how was it possible to host these defenders, since many of them are undergoing social vulnerabilities and difficult internet access. I would like to hear your comments. Pamela, do you have another question, please? Okay, you are muted. I have a question to Tara and to Luciana, that dialogues with what Luciana brought in her presentation concerning the creation of regional or local programs. Uh, uh, I had the opportunity to write an article for the Frontline, talking about the importance of the language hosting. And I would like to register how cozy it was to be able to talk to Luciana. And she was trying to understand the Portuguese, and we were trying to understand the Spanish. And we were able to dialogue concerning the defense of human rights. My question is, how can we think of regional programs, understanding that in the platform there is a concentration in Europe, taking into account the positive aspects such as language hosting, but also dangerous aspects such as the danger. It was not the case of our study because we worked what would be considered to be a low or medium risk, but there are some defenders that really need to be in a safer territory. How have you thought about this safety aspect? Summarizing, women in Latin America have been executed, it's a question of life or death. So this is my question then. Thank you, Pamela. And does anybody have any additional question to be included in this block of questions? No? Okay, so then I'm going to ask each one of you to answer the questions and make your final remarks. So then I'm going to give the floor first to Pamela. Okay, Pamela, you can answer the questions and make your final remarks, then Tara, and then Luciana. Okay, I took down the questions and I'm going to follow my notes. Firstly, before answering the questions, I'm going to dialogue with some questions brought by Tara and trying to understand how important it was during the interviews we conducted, identify the difference of programs such as the Frontline or Defend Red in Spain, and to think how we at IFIRJ would have constraints to ensure a variety of hosting, which is so much needed. And this different element, for example, the legal and psychological support or counseling in the Brazilian case reinforces the importance of living from the collective perspectives. We led by the group of teachers without parties, we have a judicialization of the teaching activity, extrajudicial notice, legal lawsuits that sometimes even going when in court in some cases we are defeated. The teacher was accused, but he is able to prove his innocence. But what about the mental health of this person, which is heavily affected? We have several dimensions, several layers in this hosting, and this opens up pathways to think how institutions with different profiles can outline these hosting programs. For example, the IFRJ, when produces teaching material concerning human rights education, when guarantees continued education, and when it says, yes, you can address the topics A, B, and C. This is supported by the law. To us, this is a form of institutional hosting, and they should go hand in hand. And also bringing something that Amanda raised as a question, and I will also would like to further address. I think this low interest for a temporary relocation can be interpreted in different ways. One of them would be those who are struggling here in Brazil think about the collective perspective. So what's the point of traveling and abandoning my colleagues that are struggling here? And another one, as Amanda said, is the intersectional perspective of hosting. If in our case we are talking mainly about educators, and many of them potentially they are not only mothers, but they are involved with taking care of some other family members. How can deal with that? Amanda and myself wrote a book about the Lei do Espaço Coruja concerning Marielle Franco, and we made a presentation in a Canadian university, but there Marielle, together with us, already talked about the need to think about this spaces of struggle as a space that can also host children. We have to think about actions, can be international human rights events or hosting programs that effectively give a family hosting, because understanding that the care of children is not only on women, and this may have reflections in the interest for temporary relocations.
So closing now, in the perspective of the public administration, funds and financing, it is important. I have learned a lot with Alais Benevides, who is from the research team. She's a doctorate student. She is a PhD in law. We have different perspectives of what human rights are. Our perspective is Latin. It's a Latin perspective, anti-capitalist perspective. So I believe in public education, free and quality education. This makes it important to understand the relationship between the public and the private is a danger path in the conservative wave that tries to privatize education and really make it of terrible qualities. So this is an impact for us to be faster in the decisions and the budget decisions. There's a very important phrase for the feminist, Brazilian feminist movement. Diverse but not dispersed. And I think this helps us think what we're talking about. We are a diverse. It has its own characteristics, budget allocation, what can be done. As frontline defenders, the protect, defend, global justice, the professors of Schools Without Party, the MST, which is a social movement, that we can be diverse, but not dispersed. I'll close here. Thank you, Pamela. So Tara, could you now answer my question and make your final remarks?
Sure. I lost connection there. There's a power cut, but I'm connecting on my phone, so hopefully it'll be okay. So I had a few comments. So one question was on how the pandemic had impacted our program, and it had a serious impact. It stopped our work temporarily. First of all, because as an organization and us ourselves in our individual personal lives, we were also dealing with the pandemic. And we had to think about the security of our staff. And as always, it's the do no harm principle. So before we act, we need to be sure that we're not doing any harm. And with the global health situation and the travel restrictions and the increased risks that travel would bring, we weren't really in a position to host human rights defenders in Ireland. Now, on the day that the Irish government brought in restrictions at the very beginning of the pandemic, we had a human rights defender arrive at the airport in Ireland for their R&R stay. So that was an interesting experience for that human rights defender. They dealt with it very well. And how we adapted was to host the defender at a homestay. So they were staying with a family, and this homestay family provided English language tuition. So the school we usually use had stopped their programs, but the defender was able to live with the family and also have the English lessons with the family. So we were very lucky in that sense. And the local environment, so there was a 5-kilometer restriction of movement, but the local environment involved lovely walks by the sea. So we were able to manage. But given the restrictions over the last 2 years, a lot of our support had to be in the defender's own home or in their own country. So things that they were able to do online English language lessons or online Spanish language lessons, or access kind of local counseling supports or massage supports or well-being supports. And then over the past year, some human rights defenders have been able to travel locally. So to go by the sea in their local environment or spend some time with their family in their local environment. And also they have been able to travel. So seeing opportunities where it was safe to travel, a safe country or other opportunities like that. So in closing remarks, I wanted to pick up on something that Amanda had said there, which was very important. To think about, or to try to think about the inhibitors or the enabling factors for a human rights defender, for an educator to be able to participate in this program. So what are the responsibilities they have and what are the responsibilities they need to take care of before they can participate. So obviously they all have a job. So what would it mean to leave, to take time off from their job? What does it mean in terms of what they tell their employer or ask their employer for? What does it mean in terms of salary? What does it mean in terms of their caregiver responsibilities? So sometimes the financial support is not just for hosting them in a new space, it's for their other financial responsibilities in caregiving. So to maybe think about that or ask defenders what are their other commitments that they need to think about. The other thing is access and privilege. So Luciana touched on this, that not everybody can participate in these types of programs. So it's a privileged number of defenders, and to think about who is getting access to the program. What are the profiles of the educators, and where are they from? Pamela mentioned language and challenges around language. So in Frontline, we're lucky in that several colleagues speak a range of languages. So we generally have French and Spanish and Arabic and Russian and Portuguese speakers. But we don't always have them in Dublin. So we do need to bring in external support for interpretation through volunteers often, or professional interpreting. So that it can be intense. It can be a significant part of delivering a useful program for the defender. So Pamela, you raised a good point about thinking about how to do that. And also, my last point would be, you will have a number of shared advantages or disadvantages or challenges. So you, as you mentioned, you have the Latin American context, and it's very interesting for you to share experiences and learn from other partners or peers in Latin America. You also have peers in the education field, as a university, as an educational institution. Then you have commonality of trying to deliver a program for educators. And then you may also think about a similar context to Brazil. So not just the Latin American context, but the particular political context in Brazil. And there might be other host programs with similar political contexts in which they're operating, that, similar risks or persecution that the educators are facing in Brazil. I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Tara. Obrigada pelas colocações. É muito importante esse diálogo. Vou passar a palavra, então, para a Luciana poder responder.
This dialogue is so important.
Thank you. So I
troquei o canal aqui. As tecnologias às vezes nos desafiam. Perdão. Não estavam me ouvindo, né?
She also moved the channel. Technology sometimes complicates. Tara, thank you very much for your notices. It's very important talking about the pandemic. And now, Luciana, please answer your questions and make your final considerations so we can move on. Luciana?
Thank you. So I will respond the answer from Pamela, that it is very important. It is related with the level of risk of the defender and how a local, national, or international relocation program could deal with this risk situation. So, as you know, we have to do a risk assessment in each case of the defenders that will be relocated. And depending on the results of this assessment, it will be decided if a local, national, or regional relocation would be a good option for this defender. There are some cases in which the answer will be no. A regional relocation will not be a safe place for this defender. So these defenders needs to be relocated internationally. And that's why the regional and national programs have to cooperate with the international programs. That shelter initiative programs be supporting the local and national initiative doesn't mean that we don't see the extra and added value of the international relocation programs. All these programs are needed for different reasons and for different profile of defenders and for different situations of risk that they are facing. So in some cases, a national relocation will be enough, and in other cases, it will not. And as Pamela mentioned, probably for most of the low and middle risk cases, the national relocation would be a good option. About the final remarks, as you know, through the Shelter Initiative program, we are providing advice, but also financial support to the development of this feasibility research. But as you also know, we have more financial support to continue supporting the implementation of the temporary relocation programs. So when we asked to our co-parts to develop a feasibility research, we asked them to answer two questions. One of them was, a temporary relocation program is a need in my country, is something that the defenders will need and that can provide them an answer to their situation of risk. And the second answer that we asked you to respond was if your organization was the right actor to implement this program. And honestly, we didn't expect that any organization developing a feasibility research decided that the program was necessary, but that their organization was not the right actor to implement that. So now we are facing this situation with the Instituto Federal de Rio de Janeiro. But we are very, very lucky also because you have worked with a big network in Brazil. There are other national actors involved in the research committee, and you have reached them out, etc. So we have the hope that with your support, of course, we will find the right actor to implement this program, because the results of your study is that the educators are at risk in Brazil, and that there is a percentage of them, 30% of them, that need to be relocated. So we hope to be able to provide support to another actor of your trust and that be part of your network, and with your support that be able to implement this kind of program in Brazil. And once again, I know that I say it several times, but I wanted to thank you again for this wonderful work that you have done, and this research and the results and the commitment that you have put during the whole project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luciana, for your remarks. We thank you for your support, your commitment that has always been present. Now, since we have had all the answers, I would like to give the floor to Marcos Vinicius so that he can make some final remarks on behalf of RFRJ. Thank you, Evelyn. It's a great joy to see the materialization of a project that was very quick, and it's an example of when you run a project that in spite of all obstacles, but were finally overcome. So on behalf of IFRJ, I would like to congratulate Evelyn and Pamela and the Protect Defenders for the support, and to say that you bring wonderful results. As I said, I had only a teaser of some of the findings, the beautiful comics, and we are very curious to look through the whole project, the results. But the answers also to the questionnaire, I didn't expect to be so many, and the optimization of this insertion, and that bring very interesting results. So once again, I would like to thank the participation of Tara on behalf of Frontline Defenders, Luciana, representing Protect Defenders, Amanda, Fernanda, Renan, for insisting the fellow is not because of the scholarship that they work on this, but in favor of the research, and on behalf of the office of the vice president PROAD, and until the very last minute to be able to have the simultaneous interpretation. And we were struggling with the budget, and we are glad we are able to do it. And we hope that this research, as Pamela said, is not only a research, but our research group, once again, as a researcher and coordinator. Although it's called Apitec, it has always had an action external to the research, involving the community, so the society, even before the consolidation of the research group. Pamela, I remember the course we took, free software, digital culture, so many actions crossed our mind. And I think that this was one of the first events organized by GPTEC, always worried about democratizing access and many other aspects. And I would like to end saying that in our conversations and thinking about education and human rights, it never crossed my mind that we need to be alert and strong, but we didn't imagine we had to be so strong and so united, living in the Brazilian society, subject to so many attacks. Once again, thank you and congratulations, Evelyn and Pamela, Renan, Amanda, Fernanda, and many other people who work with your research group at GPTEC. Have a great day, and thank you for the invitation to be here, neither as GPTEC or IFRG. Jay, thank you. We would like to thank you. You played a crucial role in the project. If we didn't count on Marcus' help with institutional support, and thank you so much, Marcus. A great joy to see you here. You are part of everything today. Pamela, I will give the floor to Pamela for her final remarks. Thank you. Now I'm in my mobile phone. I no longer have an internet connection. So I would like to begin the wrapping up, resuming something that's very important for us here in Brazil, which is affection. And the pandemic has taken away all the hugs and the kisses and hugging. We became distant with many meetings, screens, and Marcus is here, not only the vice president, but as a great friend, and he has always tried to make a committed academy or academia. We have in Brazil Black authors that talk about, as Conceição Avaristo and their place in the academia, such as Lélia Gonzalez, and conducting the feasibility project was an opportunity that I would like to thank Luciana, representing Protect Defenders, was the opportunity to conduct a research, not academic, but it's a warning signal of those that are at risk. It's an illustration of what has to be done immediately for the hosting. And in the final moments, I would like to thank Ivy Oliveira from Frontline Defenders, who played a crucial role, a fantastic person from the northeastern Brazil that with her sound and sensitive view of human rights in Latin America made this project possible based on the presentations, the networking, and all the pathways that she opened up for us. And also, I would like to uh, talk about publication by Frontline Defenders with Cipher. And if Evie or Tara can include here in the chat, this was a publication by Cipher where there was the case of Turkey and also talked about the persecution of educators around the world. And then I would like to resume and talk about something that I ended up forgetting. And this persecution of educators was very much at the academic level, only college professors and PhD students. I was talking to Fernando Pena, the professor at UFO. Our study tried to use a magnifying glass and says that in the fundamental education, especially the teachers who are teaching children, teenagers, and young adults, this is very heavy and very cruel. We need to give visibility that this persecution is not only academic and it's not only in the research, but is in the school floor. We conducted an analysis of the document of the Inter-American Document of Human Rights, and we highlighted the importance of talking about fundamental education, the educational professionals who earn less and less possibilities of defending themselves and being hosted. So in my final remarks, again, I would like to talk to say how happy I was to conduct this feasibility study. It can say, yes, it's feasible or it's not feasible, or indicate that's not feasible in the existing model or in the consolidated model, but there are other avenues that we can add. And I would like to close by saying a quote of a Brazilian music that says, nothing to fear but the running of the fight. We should not fear anything but the struggle. And we have many, many struggles ahead of us. Evelyn? Okay, just to close this very fruitful morning, in spite of in spite of having view all this persecution, it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you and to share this research. And I remember a segment of our primer that you will receive, and it's a way of disseminating our results and that should reach the educators. One sentence is, we are not alone. And when we have a morning such as this with everyone, I say, in spite of all the conservative wave that Brazil is going through, the persecutions, harassments that we educate are suffering, we still have a space for resistance. We have institutions that support us, where we can look for support. We have programs such as Frontline and Protect Defenders and other spaces that we can use. So I would like to thank you all for your presence, and once again to thank this marvelous team: Renê Collier, Amanda Mendonça, Daniela Correia, Fernanda Terra, Pamela Passas, and myself, Evelyn Mota. Thank you so much for everything, and see you next time. Bye-bye.